Now, as our brains are matching patterns and they're simulating things all the time, this is something that never stops, really. We're doing it all the time. The thing about our world is that we never have complete information. We only have some fraction of the available information that's out there to either match pattern or make a completely accurate simulation.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that our brains also do all the time is a process called interpretation. And interpretation is noticing something in the environment, some incomplete piece of information, and then in the absence of any other information to the contrary, we start to fill in details based on our past experience, based on other patterns that we've seen, based on our experience or memories or all of those things. We fill in the blanks.
With the most likely.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because this is something that happens, even on a physiological level. If you have a gap in your eyesight, many times what happens, or there's actually two gaps that all of us have in our eyesight, which is where our optic nerve connects to our eye. We literally can't see, and in our field of vision, there are two complete blind spots that most of us have never been aware of. But our brains are taking in all the surrounding information and it's literally filling in the blanks. So we see, one nice complete field of vision that is not there, which is weird. But our brains have this ability and they can do it in a very powerful way.
That's cool.
We do this with our memories. We do this with information that we have, information or patterns or things that we have already experienced. That's why, sometimes you'll meet somebody and you'll have a 10-minute conversation with them and you'll be, well, I really like this person or I really don't like this person at all. And that's like 10 minutes of available information. You have very little.
Oh, but they could remind you of someone else.
They remind you of patterns or associations or all of these things. And that's how our brains use interpretation. We're filling in the blanks all the time. And that, sometimes you don't like somebody you meet, and then you spend more time with them, and then you actually like them.
Makes sense.
Well, the previous dislike was an interpretation. You're associating patterns that may not be true, but in the absence of information...
Right, that's what your brain does.
That's what your brain does.
Interesting.
Now, the really interesting thing about this is that our memories actually don't work like a hard drive. Like there's something stored in a specific place, and then when you remember it, you retrieve it and look at it, and then it goes back exactly, where it was, how it was.
No.
It doesn't work at all. Every time you call up a memory or make an interpretation, that memory gets called up, and then it is restored differently in the brain, which is really awesome, actually, because it allows us to reinterpret patterns that we may have already experienced. And there's an entire book in the Personal MBA. It's called Recreate Your Life by Morty Lefko that talks about this. It's figuring out the patterns that you have already found.
Right.
And then calling them up and then reinterpreting it in a different light and then restoring it.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is, because of the mental simulation parts of our brain work on our memories, and our memories are associations that have already been interpreted.
Yeah.
If you reinterpret something, if you call it back up, reinterpret it, and then restore it, your predictions or your patterns or your simulations will change in response to that.
And I think the point of this is that it's a way of working with your brain to make yourself like a higher functioning person.
Yes.
Like, for example, when I first decided that I didn't want to be a New York actor anymore, it was a big, it felt like a huge failure for a long time. And then I don't remember if Josh had read this book or not, but we were talking about this one day and like looking at reinterpreting it. And I got to tell you, since that day, I mean, I don't know. It hasn't felt like such a big failure anymore. It just felt like a decision that I made to go another way. And whether that's me like hacking my brain or whether it's me having a little bit of distance and just being able to see it a different way, I don't really care how it works. It just makes you a much more functioning person.
Yeah. Same thing with when, I was in a job that I hated at P&G.
Right, but was supposedly the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And you should stay in this job forever.
I was on, upper management, CEO track. And, at one
Straight
point.
out of college.
Yeah. And at one point in my life, I thought it would be a really grand thing to be an executive of a large company.
And let me tell you, he was miserable.
I was really miserable. And
really?
It was easy to see. It's like, this is not something I want. I'm not happy here.
But you're feeling
I'm a failure. I'm a failure.
But it's feeling like this is not what this was supposed to be.
Exactly.
And that's the problem.
And so being able to reinterpret it as I did not fail, I got more information about what I wanted, and I made a decision based on that.
Yeah.
Same exact information. I left my job at P&G. Or actually, at that point, I found another job in P&G that I really liked a lot better. But reinterpreting that was awesome because it allowed me to view the very same circumstance in a completely different light. That was far more functional, was far more useful in actually getting us to the place where we wanted to go, instead of just drowning in our own sorrow at being complete and utter life failures, for not wanting something that we thought we wanted in the first place.
Not wanting something you had wanted as like a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's an okay thing. So I think all of these human mind models, they're super fascinating, but the most important thing is that you're learning how to work with yourself first and foremost, and then, expanding it out to your colleagues and people who are maybe working under you, and then obviously your customers.
Exactly. So reinterpretation, if you're feeling really bad about yourself in anything, I mean, this is a very useful thing in all sorts of different situations.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah, call up those associations and memories. And actually, I highly recommend picking up Recreate Your Life because it gives you a complete process for doing this. But call up those associations and figure out what are some different ways that you could interpret this. What are some different things, where your brain filled in information, are there alternate interpretations that may be just as valid or more valid than the one, your brain came up with on its own?
And be generous with yourself because this is going to feel very weird.
Right.
But try it. Yeah,
it's almost like the report card that your brain generates yourself. You can go back and fudge it. And that's okay. It really is. I mean, you can go back and change your memories or change your associations. And if you change your memories and associations, you change the predictions that your brain makes based on those memories.
Because you're changing the patterns that are associated in your brain.
I mean, how cool is that? I mean, and this is something that you can do. It doesn't take a long time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. But the results of a little time and practice spent doing this can have huge impacts on your self-esteem, your self-efficacy, your productivity. I mean, all of these things are based on the associations and the simulations your brains make. And the more that you can influence the results of that natural process that's going on all the time, you can have some really huge results with not a whole lot of effort. That's reinterpretation.